So my theme this month is Dare to Dream. And today's topic probably won't surprise you. It's Sometimes I Forget. That was Wayne Moore singing. He's also the composer of that song. So I appreciate being able to use his line, "Sometimes I forget," even though my heart already knows. And the theme this month, Dare to Dream, is also a song title, which was written and recorded by Suze Ogden. And those of you who took the Principles of Financial Freedom class with me back a few weeks ago will remember Suze from the God Song, which we sang every week during that class. So you'll get to hear Dare to Dream at the end of this talk. And I chose this theme this month as a continuation of last week's talk about magnificent discoveries. And today's topic, Sometimes I Forget, is because sometimes we forget. We forget to dream. We forget to envision. We forget to trust. We forget to believe. That doesn't mean that our dreams are no longer possible or that less is more. What it means, now listen because this is prophetic. What it means is sometimes we forget. That doesn't mean that our dreams are no longer possible. Now, a psychologist probably could do a whole therapy session on this topic. And a psychiatrist could probably do a whole book on it. But the real question is, what do I forget? That my ideas are worth manifesting in my life? Do I forget that I have the power to direct my energies? Do I forget that my past is over and that I'm developing a new truth of my being in this very moment? Or who knows? The list of possibilities is unending when we haven't yet established a solid, ongoing connection with the source of our being, with God. So that's what I have forgotten. That the source of my being is God, Spirit, divine energy. And that it's God at work by means of me. And that whatever I can conceive, I can achieve at no one else's expense when I choose to. Those of you who were here last week will remember the story I told about Monty Roberts and the success of his dream, despite the F grade that his teacher gave him when he wrote about his dream in high school. A lot of you probably remember the stories you heard about millionaire J. Paul Getty, who made and lost $1 million 11 times before he made $1 million and didn't lose it. Rather, he multiplied that dozens of times over. Here are some other names you may recognize and their wake-up calls. Louisa May Alcott, as a young woman, was told by her family to be a servant or be a seamstress because she had no other talents. Alcott, as you may remember, wrote Little Women, along with 20 other books, 33 short stories, and 13 poems, all of which were published. She began writing when she was 16. She was in her early 30s before her writings began to be published. The name Beethoven may be familiar to you, not the dog, but Ludwig Beethoven, who was awkward as a student, and particularly as a student of the violin. He preferred to play his own compositions instead of improving his technique. His music teacher called him hopeless as a violinist and hopeless as a composer. Louis Pasteur was a mediocre student in his university studies. He ranked 15 out of 25 in his chemistry classes. These stories go on and on. Those of you taking our new class on creative process in the individual will remember last week's main point in chapter 1. I won't put you on the spot, students. Main point in chapter 1, the lesson to be learned is the triumph of principle over precedent. That what has happened in the past has nothing to do with the present moment unless I bring it forward from the past into the present moment. That precedent is triumphed over by principle when I reach for the new. So when I reflect on these kinds of stories and dozens of other equally poignant ones, when I reflect, it's not so much about daring to dream as it is, how dare we not to? Judge Thomas Troward put it this way. He said the creative process can only be achieved as limitless and progressive. That is, proceeding stage by stage, each stage being necessary as a preparation for the one that is to follow. Stage by stage. Some of you may remember the old saying, bit by bit, the mouse chewed into the cable. Step by step, we progress. And here are Dr. Michael Mahoney's thoughts about this. He says, sometimes I forget that limited ideas are an impediment to transformation. We can get stuck with an idea, with a diagnosis, with a disorder, with a developmental history, and no longer see it as possible to live in any other way. In today's world, we would call that stuck in our stuff, wouldn't we? So it is that sometimes we do get stuck in old patterns, limited ideas, maybe even in analysis paralysis. And that's the time to dare to dream. That's the time to remember what our heart already knows. That's the time to remember that we are an integral part of a universal, eternal journey. And that's a journey of life. And it has infinite possibilities. That's the time to remember that we have the power to draw upon infinite resources, to grow, to change, to learn, to live gloriously this life we have been given. Time to challenge any limitation. You'll hear that in the song that follows this talk. Time to challenge any limitation, to conquer any doubt, to walk in faith, to dare to do greater things than you've ever done before. And, actually, as I look around this room, I'm reminded that many of you did those very things when you decided to move here from far away across the sea. Some further than others, since some of you started on Oahu and moved across the sea to Big Island. And the rest of us from a bigger rock, which we commonly refer to as the mainland. Some of us have changed our lifestyles dramatically in doing so. Others continue a chosen lifestyle and adapt it to these surroundings. Doesn't matter which, does it? What matters is the fit for each individual standing in his or her untruth or truth. So last week I referred briefly to Mike Dooley's book, Infinite Possibilities. Well, I'm back, and they brought that book back with me because I want to talk about it some more. As I've been reading through it again, my thoughts were struck with, every day my life is impacted by infinite possibilities. Here on Sunday mornings, when I hear you're standing in the light, in the classes that we have on Tuesday mornings, Tuesday, I'll get it. Wednesday night and Thursday morning. Thank you. The midweek gathering that we do in Waimea on Tuesday afternoons. The contacts that I have with members of the local community these days, working with public agencies. Ye gods, it's everywhere that I get these realizations of the thought processes that surround us when we are open to those infinite possibilities. So here's a note to myself. Remember this. Remember that infinite possibilities are all around me as well as within me. Oh, and by the way, I attract to me those who possess similar thoughts and complementary dreams. My husband would have described that as walking in tall grass. And as I look around this room, I realize I'm walking in tall grass in the magnificence of what's here right now. So I want to share with you a couple of stories out of Mike Dooley's book. When he was a small boy, he learned to ride a horse, primarily because other members of his family, his siblings, rode horses. He was the youngest of the group, and the family was very competitive where riding horses was concerned. So when he was about 5 years old, they went to some kind of an event, and the older brothers and sisters rode, and they were awarded a variety of different awards, medals for their prowess. And at the very end, when the smallest children performed, the 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, that was the group that Mike was in. He didn't do very well, but he got through it. So he was very surprised to hear his name called to be given an award. And the award was 6th place in a field of 6 competitors. So even at the tender age of 5, he realized that he had nowhere to go but up on that one. So he put his mind to it as he got older, and he got better. And he did win awards in horseback riding when he was still in his tweens and his teens. Then he went away to college. And when he graduated from college with an accounting degree. Isn't that interesting in view of the path that he has chosen as his passion? But he was hired by one of the big 8 accounting firms, and he was really pretty blown up with himself as a result of this. Well, like most new employees into this large accounting firm, he was assigned to the audit department, which is kind of an entry level in the large accounting firms. And by his own admission, he was the worst auditor, certainly, that they had ever had in that firm, maybe anywhere else. And he went home to visit his folks one weekend, and his mother asked him how he was doing, and he told her that he was doing very poorly. Actually, his word was awful, and that he fully expected that by the end of the month he would no longer be working there. And she said to him, well, what are you going to do about it? And he said he laid down on the couch and he thought about that, and he thought back to that time when he was a small child, and he was 6th in a field of 6. And she had asked him that question then, what are you going to do about it? And so, as a small child, He had laid in bed at night and prayed and said, I want to win medals like my brothers and sisters. I want to be first in the various events that I enter. And I will do what is necessary in order for that to happen. And as he thought about that, he remembered that that happened. So as he laid there on the couch in his mother's home as an adult about to be fired as an accountant in a big 8 firm, he said he began to visualize himself walking down the hall in the offices where he worked and having people say to him, nice job, Mike. You're such an asset to our organization. And walking by a mirror and looking at himself and saying, I am capable. I love my work. I love being here. And he said, I don't know how long that went on, but I visualized that and I talked to myself. And he said about a week went by, and every night when he went to bed, he did that same visualization and that same affirmative prayer. And sure enough, at the end of the month, he got called into the HR office, the Human Resources office, and he thought, here comes the pink slip. And instead, the head of HR said to him, you know, one of the things that we have decided is that we have an abundance of accountants in our audit department. And he thought, oh yeah, 6th in a field of 6. And so we have decided that we're going to pull you out of the audit department and we're going to put you in the tax preparation department instead. And he went, whoa, what a gift. What a gift. And so he couldn't wait to move. And he said within a month, he found himself walking down that same hall that he had visualized in his creative visualization. And people were saying to him, boy, you really enjoyed tax preparation, don't you? You just seem to be in your right and perfect place. And he said, I felt so good, and I remembered that visualization. And what was that? He took his mind off what wasn't working and put it on to an outcome that was positive, life-affirming for him, and also for the big 8 firm for which he worked. And as a result of that, it unfolded. It was just in a slightly different setting. It didn't even change company. He didn't even change offices. They left him in the same office for that time period until they had an opportunity to move him over into tax preparation. So he was doing that over in the auditing department and prospering. So here's what Holmes says about that. All thought is creative, according to the nature, the impulse, the emotion, and the conviction behind the thought. The nature, the impulse, the emotion, and the conviction. Well, those are the kinds of things that sometimes we forget. What is behind my thought? What thought should I choose? Sometimes I forget that my life is a journey, and I'm not trapped in any path that I've chosen. I am getting stronger. My awareness is growing because the power of creation is within me to draw upon. And even when we don't have a specific path, when we have an outcome that we intend, the universe fills in all the blanks, doesn't it? Walking down the same hall, but with a whole different reason for being there. Mike's focus in 2 very different settings there at 2 very different times was on the result, on the outcome. So when you or I are focused on any issue, any challenge, any problem, if you want to call it that, that is what keeps growing and attracting our attention, the problem. The more I tinker with it, the more energized it becomes because my attention is going where my intention is. So here's something to think about, students. Remember the universal law of correspondence. And in case you need a kind of a pick-me-up on that, you can go to page 306 in the Science of Mind text. The law of correspondence goes like this. The limit of our ability to demonstrate depends upon our ability to provide a mental equivalent. Some call it a spiritual prototype. A mental equivalent of our desires, for the law of correspondence works from the belief to the thing. When the belief is focused on the outcome, that's what becomes energized, directed, and achieved. Think, see, and feel that activity in action. Well, I suppose none of my talks is without at least one defining term benefit. And this talk's no exception. And I saved this for last with conscious intention. Like almost every word in the English language, the word forget has more than one meaning. And here's the meaning that I've chosen for application to the principles and the ideas that I've brought forth in this talk. The definition of forget is to put out of one's mind, to cease to think of or consider. You'll notice that there is no reference to fail to remember, cannot recall, or it's gone. Let me repeat the definition. To put out of one's mind, to cease to think of, or to consider. Personally, I find that very encouraging. I may have put it out of my mind in this moment. I may have ceased thinking or considering it in this moment. It's not gone. It's me who has been on timeout. And it's me who can call it or recall it to mind and to start thinking or considering it. It's still in the files. Sometimes a resort is necessary. So, by the way, I have a little ditty for you. Reverend Jane Holt McKenzie, whom most of you met when she and Robin were here last month, has just completed the first 2 weeks of a 6-week radiation therapy on the mainland. And when we talked yesterday morning on the phone, which we do pretty much every morning these days, she sang for me a little song that she sings while she's having her therapy each morning. You'll recall that she was here 2 of the weeks we were doing the series on Are You Having Any Fun? So she may think I sing to you a lot, which you probably graciously would decline. But in any event, she said, you got to hear this little song that I sing during my radiation therapy every morning. And she got this from Dr. Patricia Coker, who is a medical doctor practicing in the Bay Area in California. Now see if you recognize this tune, but don't ignore these words. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. I'm so glad, it feels so good. Every little cell in my body is well. Dare to dream that. And so it is.
So it is.